Well, thank you, Melissa Lee, and welcome Representative from Kansas, Republican, Tim Huelskamp. And I find it very fascinating, Congressman, and welcome for being here, that many, including yourself, that have been really adamant about trying to control the debt, don't get very much applause for that dynamic. As a matter of fact, it seems like the group that you're kind of involved with gets blamed for much of what has been going wrong. What do you think is going on with debt right now? When do you think we're going to reach that next 16+ trillion debt ceiling level?
Well, it's pretty amazing. Just last August, there was the grand debt deal, which I didn't support. But before those cuts actually take place, our office predicts we will hit another debt limit that sometime maybe on December 31st, we'll run out of that $2.1 trillion that the president borrowed, and we'll run through that deficit spending. We're spending $3 billion more than we're taking in every day, running a $3.3 billion deficit. So every single day for the last 6 months, we've been adding to that deficit, and by the end of the year, we're likely to hit that limit once again.
Well, obviously, the solution must be to raise taxes. We need to raise taxes to pay for that. How far into the taking care of the debt problem does a higher tax scenario get us, Congressman?
Well, I think if we allowed the Bush-Obama tax cuts to expire, we would crater the economy, the deficit would widen. The problem up here is not taxes, it's too much spending. And in the debt deal, we didn't cut spending enough. I didn't think we ended up cutting it at all, and folks can agree or disagree. But the point being is we're going to have our fourth straight year of trillion-dollar deficits. You know, and I'm a member of the Tea Party, and folks, we come up here to change that and to say, hey, at least we didn't make it worse. That's not good enough for the American people.
All right, let's keep this theme. You're part of the House Ag Committee. There's a farm bill right now that's working its way through the Senate. I believe in July the House will have its version. Can you give me a quick synopsis of what's going on in that bill and what's the biggest subsidy in that bill? Because we're all, of course, talking about that buzzword of subsidies.
Well, there are over $20 billion in cuts to America's farmers and ranchers. They're willing to step up the plate, do their share. But what the White House and the Senate Democrats do not want to focus on is the 80% of the farm bill that deals with food stamps. That's where all the growth has been.
Wait a minute. 80% of this bill, this farm subsidy bill, is food stamps? I'm kind of caught off guard there. I didn't realize that was embedded in this. I just read something. I think we spent in 2008 under $40 billion in food stamps. I think in 2012 we're estimated to spend over 80. Why is it 80% of the bill, and are they going to deal with this? Because that's where you get vilified. You bring up the problems, but nobody wants to make the cuts, and if you want to make the cuts, you're an ugly American for doing so.
Well, just a few months ago, the House passed a bill that would reduce spending on food stamps 4%. And the president and the Democrats just went wild. But in the last decade, there's been a 267% increase in food stamp spending. And we talk about a minimal 4% cut, and it's like the end of the world. But that's where all the spending is in the Farm Bill. 80% has to do with food stamps and related programs. A much smaller part has to do with agriculture and rural development. And oftentimes in Washington, they forget the bigger part of the picture and focus and miss the real battle here. That's the growth in food stamps.
Well, you know, if we don't look at the big programs, and listen, viewers, listeners, I'm not making a statement about food stamps. I'm a market guy. I am talking about you can't continue to fund everything. You have to prioritize. Congressman, is there an easy answer? There's obviously a stalemate here, not only whether it's taxes or spending that makes inroads, but just going into these programs at all is almost impossible.
Well, Washington has demonstrated they have a real inability to do this. The president does not want to cut anything. Senate Democrats don't want to cut anything. A lot of times the House Republicans don't want to cut nearly enough, but there's no simple answer. But the best answer would be we make those decisions soon ourselves rather than worrying about what our creditors think when we hit this debt ceiling. You know, we've had our credit rating downgraded by one credit rating agency back on August 5th. We want to avoid a downgrade by two other rating agencies because when we do that, we potentially lose control of our ability to determine our destination. Our destination, if we're going to get there, we've got to cut spending. That's the only way we can get there in order to get our fiscal budget and fiscal house in order.
Well, Congressman, you just raised actually a very touchy subject, rating agencies, because today many of us on the trading floors are on rating agency watch. There's going to be potentially banks, maybe even countries that may be downgraded today. Are you the extreme problem? That caucus of Tea Party, are they the problem? Is that why the rating agencies are looking at various banks or have already dealt with our AAA rating? Are you the problem or the solution? Final word, sir.
We are part of the solution. The problem is not the rating agencies. The reality is when you borrow $3.3 billion every day, somebody's going to say, hey, you can't sustain that. That's when your credit rating gets downgraded. And we have to have solutions in Washington that says, no, here's our solution long-term, how we solve it. We can't solve it overnight, but we better figure out how to solve it in the next 5 years, or perhaps the next 2 years, or in the next 6 months. We better have a plan to get our fiscal house in order, or we run the risk of having our credit rating downgraded again like it was last August.
Congressman, thank you for joining the show.
Appreciate it.
Melissa Lee, back to you.
Thank you very much, Rick Santelli. Just a few minutes until